Hello, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Dr. Andy Mycock. I'm Reader in Politics at the University of Huddersfield, and I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar, which is co-produced by the Institute for Community Studies based in the Young Foundation and the Civic Universities Network. Thank you very much for coming along today. I am Reader in Politics at the University of Huddersfield. I'm also a member of the Civic Journey project, which is based at the Institute for Community Studies, and it's a two-year program funded by National Citizen Service, which is looking at how young people transition from childhood to early adulthood, and particularly looking at their experiences of civic learning and active citizenship as they grow up. And the Enhancing the Student Experience webinar is very much focused on the idea that there is in many ways a journey that all young people undertake in terms of their development, in terms of the knowledge, the skills, the behaviors, the attitudes, and their participation in civic life as they develop. And it's very much focused in the connection with the idea of that young people are themselves both becoming and being citizens at any point during the time that they grow up. A bit of housekeeping before we start the session. This session will be recorded and will be made available after the event. And we are also very keen to make sure that you participate in the event. And so please do use the question and answer function to ask your questions of the panel, and which we'll put to them after their opening comments. You can also use the chat function too for your event commentary and connecting with others. And also please do tweet out using the hashtags that we provided for you to make sure that others are aware of the event taking place today. The objectives of today's event are in many ways focused on the growing recognition of the importance of the developing understanding of university student civic experience as part of that wider programme of the Civic Universities agenda. And today we want to think about it in two ways: how we can develop knowledge about how universities are enhancing the student civic experience in diverse and innovative ways, but also to explore how the student civic experience is supported within the curriculum across campuses and in local communities. And to do so, we're going to focus on 4 different case studies. The session seeks to open up spaces to consider how universities can best support the civic experience of all students. And we're going to be looking at 4 different aspects: how this can be achieved within the curriculum, how universities might develop extracurricular programs, the value of service learning, but also student-led approaches to civic learning and engagement. The 4 presentations are going to be based on different programs that are currently or have been delivered in the recent past. The first presenter is Dr. Alison Boddy, who's Senior Lecturer in Philanthropic Studies and Social Policy at the University of Kent. And her case study is going to look at philanthropy in action, an experiential student philanthropy module for third-year undergraduate students within social science programs. The second case study is going to be provided by Dr. James Ford, who's the Global Professional Award Manager at the University of Huddersfield. And his case study is going to look at the widening of the reach of student development at the University of Huddersfield through the Global Professional Award Programme. The third presenter is going to be Andy Coppins, who's the Community Engagement Volunteering Manager at Nottingham Trent University. And Andy's going to be focusing on the idea of service learning and other approaches for community engaged learning. Our fourth presentation brings together 3 speakers who are going to focus on a case study based at the University of Leeds. Dr. Charlie Denriver is lecturer at the Centre for Teaching Innovation and Scholarship at Leeds University. And he's going to be joined by recent alumni Josh Burke, who's a placemaker at Situ. And also Jen Wilkins, who's the Centre Manager at the Community Action to Create Hope, or CATCH, which is based in Leeds. And their case study is going to look at community engaged learning through the Engaging the Modern City project. To give a little bit of introduction to our session, I'd like to just articulate a few words around what is the student civic experience. I think if we go back and think about the groundbreaking Civic Universities Commission final report, which was published in 2019 by the UPP Foundation, it was clear that it placed students at the heart of a radical new vision of how universities can become truly civic. And indeed, the role of students has been recognised as integral to truly civic universities. And since the publication of the UPP Foundation's report, higher education institutions across the United Kingdom have sought to develop imaginative new ways of engaging with industry and connecting students to local places to increase their transferable skills, employability, and knowledge. The Civic University agenda has thus opened up new ways to understand the student experience, in higher education. And it's focused on the civic life of universities and encouraged innovation in changing the civic culture and activities of students on campuses across the country. The civic focus of universities has also encouraged an enhancement in innovations in teaching and learning through work placements and extracurricular opportunities such as engaging in volunteering and social action. And this means that students are increasingly seen as partners in inclusive learning, research and public engagement communities, which extend across and beyond the campuses where they study. As the recently published UPP Foundation Student Futures Commission Manifesto noted, there is, however, an urgent need to rebuild the links between students, universities, and the communities in which they live and study after the COVID-19 pandemic. The Commission Chair, Mary Koenig-Cook, CBA, noted that the pandemic impacted on many students' confidence, their sense of self-esteem, and their mental health, while also bringing to sharp relief the complexity of student lives and backgrounds and the impacts of different forms of disadvantage. And in that sense, place-based civic universities can enhance the post-COVID recovery by strengthening that sense of belonging and citizenship for all students, while also positively impacting on student well-being and graduate outcomes. It can also enhance their sense of social capital, empowering students through the development of knowledge, skills, and experiences while at university to allow them to thrive as entrepreneurial, resilient, responsible, and successful graduate citizens who have pride in the places that they live and work. As such, the student civic experience is an integral component of the wider mission to embed truly civic universities within communities across the country. This seminar, in many ways, focuses on the idea of how we can seek to develop what works, how universities are presenting different innovative approaches towards enhancing the student civic experience as part of their wider civic transitions from childhood to adulthood. And this connects with yet another webinar that we held recently, which looked at mapping the student civic experience. And what we're wanting to do is to bring together case studies from across the country to develop that knowledge about what works. And we will be connecting with those of you participating today to ask you to maybe provide us with examples of other successful programs at your own institutions. A report will be published, which will provide a summary of the seminar case studies and also those other bits of evidence that allow us to build a fuller picture up about what is taking place at civic universities across the country in terms of enhancing the civic university experience. And that will be published, and there will be the foundations for hopefully a developed piece of work, which looks again at how we can build the civic connections across the country. But now to our first presenter. Dr. Alison Boddy is going to speak about her own experiences, about how they've developed approaches in the classroom towards developing the student civic university experience through philanthropy and action. So over to you, Alison.
Thank you, Andy. I think my slides can come up, that would be great. Super, thank you. So my name is Alison Boddy. I work with the Centre for Philanthropy at the University of Kent, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about a case study example of a module which we developed, which is now in its third year of running, that has been looking at kind of this case study of student philanthropy. Can I have the next slide, please? So student philanthropy itself is a teaching and learning approach which very much looks to bring in kind of charitable giving with academic study to provide real lived experiences of charitable giving and grant making, and to teach about ideas of civic responsibility, as well as looking at how we can kind of strengthen communities. The idea is that students engage in critical decision making about charitable giving and also kind of learn a lot about what's going on within their local community. Next slide, please. Currently, we know that this is almost exclusively a US type of teaching approach, and we do believe that the module that we're running at the moment is one of the first in the UK. And if anyone in this seminar can correct me on that and wants to kind of connect if they're doing something similar, I'd be absolutely delighted to talk further about this. But where this module came from us, similar to Andy, I'm very interested in civic learning journeys, right from the early years in childhood through primary education, secondary and into HE. And I'm also really interested in co-production teaching mechanisms as well as participatory action research. So the student philanthropy module sort of came from all of these ideas coming together. And as I say, USU institutions have been leading on this for quite a while. However, we've seen much less development of student philanthropy type modules within the UK. And partly this is to do with in the US, there's significant infrastructure support for student philanthropy, whereas in the UK, we don't have that same infrastructure support. So there were some of the challenges that we had to overcome. Can I have the next slide, please? But before we kind of got there, what we really wanted to do was do a thorough literature kind of review on what was student philanthropy and was it worth pursuing? Is it effective? And there are an awful lot of studies, again, quite US based, which really do focus on this idea of student philanthropy modules enhancing academic and civic outcomes, and I've listed a number of them here, increasing volunteering and giving, increasing critical awareness of social problems, increasing philanthropic knowledge and skills, as well as community engagement, and wider general academic and civic benefits. However, the research in this area also points to the fact that some students do benefit more than others, though overall all students do seem to show some benefits as well as benefits within the local community. But obviously those who are less engaged with their local communities tend to experience the greatest benefits from these modules. And there's also been some longitudinal studies that have been done as well that do show that these modules have long-term positive impacts on long-term giving and civic engagement, suggesting in some cases up to 2.5 times, increasing the likelihood of civic engagement up to 2.5 times more than students who don't undergo those modules. But again, there's probably quite a lot we probably need to explore about that. Can I have the next slide, please? So what we decided to do at Kent was to develop this new module structure, and it's a final year undergraduate module for students studying social sciences. We very much wanted to be really informed by the research in our module structures. We spent a long time designing this module. We fundraise for this module, so we have a pot of £2,000 each year, which is donated to us by a philanthropist, and that supports the module. Now that £2,000 may come into university, but it goes immediately back out to community groups as part of this module. The module overall is a co-produced module between the academics, the students and our local community foundation, who are really kind of progressive and supportive in this. The students themselves design the funding call, so they put out an application to local community organisations saying what it is they're wanting to fund. They design the funding assessment process, and then they decide where that money is finally given. Kent Community Foundation, they support and advise our students, they manage the fund, and they carry out due diligence on the organisations who are applying for the fund. Because again, it's slightly problematic, the university being a grant funder as well in this, so that helps overcome that. Us as academics facilitate this process and really focus on bringing kind of that critical debate and knowledge into it. And community and charity groups both apply for the funding, but they also contribute to the teaching through both visits and through coming and giving talks to our students. And we really encourage a kind of warts and all approach to this with these organisations talking about the challenges of their work, plus possibilities and opportunities. Next slide, please. So on our next slide, we see this is just an example of what this module can be structured like. So all of the lectures are given up front, so they're pre-recorded. We ask students to watch them before they come to a 2-hour workshop, which is run each week. And within this workshop, we either visit a local organisation or we have a local organisation visiting us, and we start really kind of debating the local community needs and what's going on in our local community, and students actively kind of considering and kind of critically engaging in that. Then we have this practice link, which, as I say, is these talks that charities can come in and do. But within this, we also have a number of kind of key processes that students carry out for themselves, because what we constantly emphasize in this process is this is this has real world impact. At the end of the day, organisations receive funding, and there's a moral responsibility on the students to think very carefully about where that funding goes. So carry out their own needs analysis before designing the funding call, which is released. Applications then come in. Applications are then reviewed by the students, and then funding allocated and feedback provided to all of the applicants as well. And then there's a reflection session with Kent Community Foundation. Next slide, please. But this is a really important part for me here, and I think we really have to consider when we're thinking about civic journeys and we're thinking about civicness. And for me, there's always been this question, are we cultivating philanthropists, or is this about philanthropic citizenship? And for us, we were really interested in this idea of HE as a space for repoliticising social action and taking a kind of a critical approach to philanthropy as well. And so throughout the programme, we don't ever kind of present the idea that philanthropy is perfect or it is the answer to all of societal needs. And we really encourage the students to take that kind of critical idea. The most simple way I can probably give an example of this would be, for example, we can encourage people to give to a food bank, or we can encourage people to give to a food bank while we critically explore why food poverty exists and other responses that we could have beyond charity and philanthropy and for example, governmental responses. And we really engage students within all of those debates. So we seek to introduce a really kind of critical and reflective engagement and evaluation framework within this. Next slide, please. So this is the evaluation framework that we brought into the programme as well to kind of help us think about this in really critical ways. We have a before project element, so we engage all of the students who have signed up to our module before, both in terms of pre-self-assessment surveys. We ask them to write positioning statements. We then have exploration and expectation with the peers and course leaders, and this helps us structure that course, which is why I said that the module I presented to you was only an example, because the students do help us construct our ideas, who's coming in to visit, what we're going to debate, what sort of exercises we might undertake. And then during the project, we have a lot of focus on kind of reflective journals, reflective debates and informal debates. And then we have the after project, where we have post-project self-assessment surveys. And we also have focus group evaluation processes as well. And all of this is co-produced and co-delivered with our practice partner, Kent Community Foundation, who are fantastically supportive. And on this slide, you'll see the ones that are in red are what form part of the students' assessment. Final slide, please. So this year, our students, as I say, we've just gone into the third year of this, and this year, after the needs analysis process, the students came up with this as their criteria. So this funding call is currently live for charities to apply to. We have made the forms that charities use to apply as short as possible, because our fund is very small. So we don't want to overburden charities, and we've also tried to be really specific in our call as well. And so students wanted to highlight coastal areas of Kent which are particularly deprived. They wanted to highlight that they wanted to target micro organisations within this, and there's been a lot of debate that's gone on behind this, and they also wanted to particularly target those who have been affected by the cost of living crisis and refugees and asylum seekers within the area. So this presents quite a narrow call for Kent Community Foundation, which means that we only expect to get around 8 to 10 applications to come in from local organisations, because as we say, we really didn't want to overburden the organisations applying either to this, and the spend can be on either capital or revenue costs, but there is a link here at the bottom which you can go to and see the full call for funding this year. Overall, the student feedback on this module has been fantastic. We've seen students attaining probably slightly higher than what they get in their normal grades across other modules, and attendance of the module has probably been one of the biggest successes, with our average attendance for this module being significantly higher than what we see the students attending in other modules. And we've also had fantastic verbal and written feedback from the students. I think, again, it comes back to that idea of students really understanding that there's a real world impact in this, and really being hands-on in their learning and their thinking about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. That was absolutely magnificent and bang on time as well, which is much appreciated. It gives us a little bit of extra time for questions. And we've already had one question through, which is from Anne Laybourne. And she says, well, here's a nice bit of starting point. Amazing stuff, Alison. But she asks, what were the biggest challenges to getting institutional approval for the programme? And she said, would you be able to sort of just talk about this process in a little bit more detail?
Yes, so I would say, first of all, there were a number of challenges. The first challenge being getting the institution to see the academic worthiness, I suppose, of the programme, and the fact that we wanted to put in a lot of that reflective, for us, a lot of that reflective learning was really important. So convincing colleagues of the kind of academic rigour of this programme was probably one of the first hurdles that we had to overcome, but also convincing that we could fund it year on year. And so for me, that took a lot of background work to do with our philanthropist, who we're very lucky has committed to doing that year-on-year process at the moment. But of course, they could withdraw that funding at any point, which could also be a slight challenge in that. We did run it as a pilot module in the first year, which I also think gave the institution some real confidence in taking it forwards as well. But there were multiple barriers in doing that because we launched this during COVID as well. So we were doing a lot of online online engagement, and I'd also say that there are some kind of institutional challenges around how we fit this in with kind of wider modules as well. I would like this to be open to a lot more students and I think it extends far beyond the social sciences, but how we manage that on an institutional level can be quite challenging.
Thanks for that, Ali. That's really interesting. It highlights that there is a process there, which, you know, there are some hurdles, but the rewards are significant for students and for the university. We've had an anonymous attendee, which is rather magnificent. Asked the question: is the benefit for the community organisations purely financial, or are there other benefits as well?
I would like to think that there are other benefits as well. So I do think that, as I say, we do engage the organisations in coming to meet and talk to the students. Quite often, it is the organisation's first engagement with Kent Community Foundation as well, which is a really supportive infrastructure group, especially when we're targeting micro organisations. So I think they enter into a world and get a lot more infrastructure support. I think their engagement with the students is really helpful. I think it also introduces, so we link it in with our other student volunteering programs as well. So students can start volunteering, they get, and we try to build on those relationships to bring those organisations more into the university as well, and actually build up greater links with organisations. And because these are micro organisations, it is normally their first encounter with the university. So the university has lots of wonderful links with some of the larger organisations, but this programme really does often target those small micro organisations that are existing in Kent that sometimes we haven't even heard of before, and actually doing some really unique and interesting work that we can engage with a lot more and helpfully support through our research and other work that we're doing within the social sciences.
Many thanks for that, Ali. It's interesting because it has that effect which is much broader across the volunteering scope in terms of, you know, the university's extracurricular contribution, and at the same time it's underpinning the role of the university as part of that wider social infrastructure. One final question is come from Juan Pablo Rodriguez, and he's asked, under which school or unit of the university does the module sit? And I think I might ask a follow-up question to that question, Juan, which is, and does it connect to other schools and other programs across other parts of the university?
So at the moment, the module sits in what we call SSPSSR, which is Sociology, Social Research and Social Policy, and so sits under our School of Law, Sociology and Social Justice overall. And the module is accessible to those students. What we're trying to do is now look at how we can upscale this module so we can offer it across across the university, because actually, for example, students in our medical school or students who are working on conservation and anthropology, I think would hugely benefit from this. And I think the module would massively benefit as well, bringing all those different perspectives in of the students. And as the module is so student-led, I think the kind of the wider, the more diverse we can make it, the more beneficial I think it'll be for the students as well. So it is an ambition, but as I say, we're only in the 3rd year of running it, so we're looking at kind of upscaling from this point forward. But that will take funding. There's no doubt about that being a barrier. We need that infrastructure, that philanthropic infrastructure support to be able to take that next step.
Thanks very much, Ali. It's been really interesting to hear you and watch this space about how this program grows. It's very exciting. To move on to our next speaker, we've got Dr. James Ford, who's the Global Professional Award Manager at the University of Huddersfield. I'm very pleased that James is not only representing the university, but myself as well. And James is going to be talking about the experiences of the Global Professional Award Programme in terms of widening the reach of student development at the University of Huddersfield. So over to you, James.
Thanks, Andy, and hi, everyone. I'll just give a brief caveat that I may have to mute every now and then to have a brief coughing fit, so no need to worry on my behalf if you see that. I'll just wait for the slides, please, Louisa or Alan. Lovely, thank you. If you could go back to the first slide, please. That'd be great, thank you. So thanks for having me, Andy. As your introduction kind of briefly outlined, I suppose this is a case study really in a whole of institution approach to student development and student support, but particularly with an emphasis on trying to reach students who may not kind of traditionally access development programs or support systems or resources at the university, and in kind of widening that reach at the university. So I'll begin by just talking through a little bit about what the GPA is. If I could have the next slide, please. In terms of our aims and how we aim to meet those aims, and also a little bit about the context in terms of why and how this program was designed and developed in the first place. So you can see by our mission statement on that slide that the award really is about kind of building some of the key skills and attributes like a lot of student development programs are, but with a particular emphasis on educating students and giving them practice in terms of articulating those skills and attributes and seeing, reflecting on the value of those while they're at university before they leave. And there's a kind of final sub-aim in the program there, but that's really important and central to the program, which is about helping students to understand ways in which they can meaningfully contribute to a global society and what that means and what being a global citizen kind of entails. So we aim to kind of meet these aims really by embedding 3 core themes throughout the program. So the first is around employability and enterprise. So it's those kind of skills and awareness of being employable and being enterprising. Well-being is around kind of understanding the strategies and also the systems of support to support students' own well-being, but also to kind of look after their peers and to look out for the people around them. And finally, as I kind of briefly mentioned there, is the global and social awareness theme, which is that kind of that education and understanding of global citizenship and how that can be enacted both at university and as graduates in the workplace. Now, where this program really came about, I suppose there's a few aspects to the context that are really important to understand. So the program was developed and rolled out in September 2020. Prior to this, the UK HE sector really as a whole experienced a bit of a drop in terms of the numbers of graduates gaining highly skilled employment in 2018, 2019. But Huddersfield had a particularly pronounced drop. Now, Huddersfield as a university has always punched above its weight really in terms of the number of graduates who gain employment, and it's an aspect of pride for the university. But at that time, the number of students who were gaining highly skilled employment was declining. So the university wanted to do something about this really, and to make sure that graduates were competitive with other students, and particularly students from Russell Group universities, who would maybe kind of traditionally dominate kind of sought after graduate jobs and internships. A second important aspect that drove this program was the new university strategy, which has does have a focus on kind of improving the experiences of all students at the university, but with a particular focus on improving the development and support systems for non-traditional students or from non-traditional academic backgrounds. And so in particular at the university, first in family students and commuter students make up a significant proportion of the university. And so the Global Professional Award, or GPA as we call it, really seeks to help those students by building their confidence, their sense of belonging, by facilitating near-peer networks and enhancing those experiences. And then finally, as you can see by the university tagline, there's a real focus in that strategy of developing global professionals. So not just employable graduates, but graduates that are going to have a real impact on society. And that's something that we aim to do in our program. If I could have the next slide, please. So in terms of how how the program actually works to try and meet these kind of quite broad aims, I'm not going to go through the whole process map. It's relatively self-explanatory, but I think a few key things to highlight are that this is a 3-year program. Students are automatically enrolled on the GPA if they're full-time on day 1 of their enrolment at the university. So this is not an optional module. Now, it's not mandatory either, in the sense that if students decide not to engage with the program or not to do anything, it doesn't have any negative impact on their academic record, and it doesn't impact their academic studies in any way. But they are enrolled onto the module, and they are scheduled to workshops, and they are expected to attend. Now, the reason for this approach was, I suppose we were looking at the question of inclusivity, but also how you engage the disengaged. And I suppose the university's approach here with this has been, a bit of a tough love approach, really, by making it an expectation or by embedding it as part of the university experience for all undergraduates. It is 3 years. Every year, students are timetabled to face-to-face workshops, and the face-to-face element is really key because, as I mentioned before, we want to facilitate those near-peer networks. We want to build the confidence of students in peer interactions, in group working activities, and so the workshops really help to facilitate that. And finally, students do have assessment items that they have to finish every year, and those assessment items are very personal, they're very reflective, and they really center on experiential learning experiences. And that's really at the heart of the program, is the value of reflective practice, the kind of very practical practicing of what reflective practice is, and also understanding the value and importance of kind of social and cultural capital that can be gained through experiential learning and extracurricular learning. Could I have the next slide, please? So as I said, students do have a number of assignments. They're short, reflective, personal tasks that they have to finish each year. They're non-academic. One of the tasks that is recurrent in all of the years is what we currently call the GPA electives. Now, this is where students have to tell us of between 5 to 10 hours of extracurricular or experiential learning that they've done at the university. They have to provide a reflection on the development they've gained as a result of those experiences. So what kind of attributes they feel they've developed from those activities, and what development in general they've got from very specific experiences within that. We on purpose provide quite an open-ended approach in terms of what students can claim for their hours. We're not too prescriptive. That was a research and evidence-based decision, really, based on some, really good research that's out there that I'm sure most people in this virtual room are aware of around, the uptake of university-based experiences by non-traditional students, and the fact that, possibly university-based extracurricular activities, may not be suitable or may not be seen as being suitable for all students. Now, we work very closely with the Students' Union on our program. We try and promote those experiences as much as possible because Huddersfield offers some great offerings and we want students to take them up. But we want our program to reflect the fact that every student's experiences are different, and that they may do things outside of the university that they find more valuable that they may not be aware are actually valuable in terms of the social and cultural capital that they're building. So we leave it very open-ended. We have students kind of, as you would expect, claiming hours for things like part-time jobs and volunteering that they do. But we also get students who, and we encourage students to think about things that they might do in their community, caring responsibilities. They may participate in activities with their, religious institutions or whatever that might be. And we really focus on trying to show students the value of those experiences, but also giving them that guidance of how they can articulate that value, in a very physical way, on paper and in the spoken word. Can I have the next slide, please? So in terms of kind of what we can measure in terms of impact so far, the reach has been good from this approach. So we've had high numbers of students kind of completing individual assignments, and I like to remind, this is something I put together for stakeholders at the university, but I like to remind them that as well as the numbers, it's what those numbers mean. For example, it's not just 3,000 students have completed a second assignment, it's 3,000 students who have completed a wellbeing plan, who've really reflected on where they're at with their wellbeing, what kind of systems of support might be available to them and what they might be able to access in the future. Because students are enrolled onto the module and because they're scheduled to workshops, that means we get quite a high reach of students who actually attend those workshops. And the students that do engage with the program tend to enjoy it. We do get positive feedback on the kind of quality of the program, which we're really proud of. I can say a bit more of that on the next slide, please. So some of the benefits that students report from the program for them is an increased confidence, which is really pleasing to see when we get these survey results back. We ask this as a very open-ended question, so it's not leading. We do ask them kind of what advantages they gain from the program as well as improvements they'd like to see being made. But there are some common themes around increased confidence, particularly around career planning, skill development, and also peer interaction and group work, with a lot of students telling us that they feel more positive about interacting with their academic studies with group activities. We've had some really positive feedback on students who have applied for internships, placements. They feel more equipped. They feel less. We had students reporting less imposter syndrome in applying for those things, which is nice to hear. And also an enhanced awareness of well-being strategies and support for themselves and their peers. The benefits, I suppose, are derived from a co-production model. We worked very closely with students, with the Students' Union, and with subject matter experts at the university and outside the university in the initial design and development of the program. But each year we constantly reevaluate where the program could go, with a partnership and co-creation model with students at its heart. And I'm a firm believer that that's what kind of drives these satisfaction rates. And then if I could just have the final slide, please. So I suppose just to kind of wrap up now, I've kind of talked about already some of the successes. So this program's been going for 2 years now. For such an ambitious program, I like to think we're still quite a young program. I think what's gone well is that students who engage with the program seem to like it. They seem to see the value in it. They seem to see the impact that it is having on them and will have on them. Compared to other programs in the sector, we do tend to have higher engagement and completion rates, but probably because of our approach with automatically enrolling students and that kind of whole of institution approach. But that isn't to say that we're doing better than other programs, but I think it just points to the fact that the approach is a good one in terms of widening that reach and impact. But of course, we've got challenges. So for year one, we're really proud of the fact that over half of our students engage with the program in a really meaningful and sustained way. But that does mean that almost half of those year one students aren't. And I think as a lot of people who work on these programs know, if you don't capture those students early on, you've got very little chance of getting them later on. So that's a challenge. A 3-year program is ambitious, to keep students, attention and motivation with all their academic studies, and to retain that throughout the 3 years is a challenge and will continue to be a challenge. And I suppose that the last one really is about that impact. Are we reaching the right students, even though that's our aim, or are we reaching the already equipped students? How do you measure that? We're still looking at answers to that question. And finally, are we having an impact on graduate outcomes, on kind of communities? You know, it is an aim of ours. How do we measure that? You know, I'd be interested to hear either in this room or outside. You know, I can pop my email in the chat from people who have experience of this, because it's something that I feel we've made good ground in, but we're always open to hear other people's experiences as well. I think on that very open-ended note, Andy, I think that's all from me.
Many thanks, James. That was really interesting. We've had a question already from Giles, and it kind of linked to that last slide that you raised, and you said that, you know, the GPA is an automatic enrollment, but not compulsory. And Giles says, well, it's an interesting model. And he asked, well, what was the attrition rate? Well, you've just given us some sense about that attrition rate. But he went on and asked, are there any specific characteristics of those who no longer participate? And I suppose the other side of that question is, maybe, are there any characteristics about those that do continue on that journey and complete the GPA? I wonder if maybe you respond to those.
Yeah, it's a good question. We're still collecting data on this, but I mean, the early data suggests that there aren't really. We were quite surprised. There was quite an even spread of demographics in terms of the gender of students participating, the age of students participating, also the kind of ethnic backgrounds of students who were participating. It was quite an even spread, really, across the board, which we found really interesting.
And following on from that, another question which has been raised is did you find that different schools, different courses, students from different backgrounds, did you find that there was, a difference in response from lecturers and from school managers in different discipline areas to the program? Have you found that there are hot spots and cold spots in terms of the way in which they've embraced the GPA?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We had some very early advocates who were completely on board with this, and often it was because it was, courses or schools who were kind of working on similar things already, and this just kind of enhanced those offerings, and that's very much how we pitched the program. We weren't trying to reinvent the wheel necessarily, but we had schools and departments who either tried to get their students engaged and found it very, very difficult. Or, to talk very bluntly, we had schools and departments who were quite resistant to the idea, who didn't see the value, who saw it as possibly a drain on student resources. What's very interesting, though, is that when we look at the data at the end of each year of students that have completed this from certain departments and schools, there are some aspects that are unsurprising, the other schools and departments that you would expect. But some of the areas of the university where we did have the largest elements of resistance from course leaders and school managers actually had the highest number of completion rates from the students. So despite the fact that they didn't have that staff advocacy, and actually those staff told us our students will not want to do this, in some areas the students actually proved them very, very wrong, and ended up being some of the highest completers of the program.
Thanks, James. And one final question, which it links really to more that sort of background of what kind of connection do we get from external organizations? Do you find that the GPA program connects well with the social infrastructure, the community organizations outside the campus, or is this very much something which focuses on what's happening on campus?
Excuse me, it's very much what focuses on campus at the moment. It's something that we really need to improve on, to be perfectly honest, Andy. I think that's going to be the next. I think we're already in version 2.0 of GPA. There's going to be version 3.0 and 4.0. It'll go on. And I think that needs to be a priority moving forward.
Just a quick point here from Anne Laybourne, actually, which is interesting. He says, have you ever considered offering this as a non-traditional student program with numeration to try and overcome some of the barriers that you've identified?
That's a really interesting idea, Anne. No, it's not something we've considered right now, but I'd love to talk to you more about that.
Well, it's clear that this is a program in development, so it'll be interesting to see how it develops in its second, third, and fourth iterations. But James, thank you very much for a very rich presentation and a very enjoyable one too. To move on, our next speaker is Andy Coppins, who's the Community Engagement and Volunteering Manager at the Nottingham-Trent University, and he's going to be looking at his case study, which is about community engaged learning. So over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. Excellent. So, yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm Community Engagement and Volunteering Manager at Nottingham Trent University. And while the slides are being put up, I'll just kind of give you a bit of an overview. I've been here for 20 years running staff and student volunteering programs at the university. And a few years ago, I was lucky enough to have a bit of time just to be able to think about our community engagement activity more widely. And this kind of led on to looking at how our programs could be able to enable those students who may not be able to access our extracurricular activities as easily due to kind of caring responsibilities or the fact that they may have to work part-time or aren't able to access those opportunities as easily. So community engaged learning was one of the ways that we were looking at doing that, and that kind of built on the back of some excellent work from academics in our social sciences schools that had been running a service learning program for the previous 5 years, and so that developed kind of looking at developing community engaged learning. So next slide, please. So we based our kind of definition of community engaged learning upon the European Observatory definition of service learning. We decided to call it community engaged learning to kind of broaden the definition of it, but it's really a proven high impact approach that enables students to engage with their community, using their skills, knowledge and experience that they are learning and developing in their course, that addresses an identified community need. And that's a really important part of this work, is that it's an identified community need. So we work with communities and community organisations to addressing challenges or projects or ideas or research that those communities have identified as something that they're interested in looking at as well. And so those projects and ideas are co-created with those communities. So next slide, please. So through that, through the CEL that we do, students are able to apply that theoretical knowledge that they're developing to practice, and so they're developing their transferable skills, becoming more life ready, so they're able to develop those employability skills that they're learning through their course. The academics that we work with can extend their classroom, if you like, into the community. They're able to have kind of more opportunity for creativity in their teaching, to do something a bit different to the other modules that they might have on their courses, and to give an extra dimension to their teaching as well. And then for our external partners, what we're found is that it's able to kind of extend what they're able to do at the university, but it also can further their mission and goals, and hopefully kind of create that sort of positive social impact that they're looking for as well. So the next slide, please. And so really sorry for one, that's it, thanks. For us as a university, the community engaged learning really meets a number of our strategic priorities. So it helps us to contribute to challenges that are faced by our local communities, and hence kind of our civic engagement. Enables our students to take part in a more engaged and active learning with community partners. As I said at the start, it hopefully enables those students that ordinarily find it harder to engage with our extracurricular activities to be able to engage. And we are collecting data on this as we are going forward as well, to see how effective it is being at that as well. And then it also offers an alternative work-like experience for our students' employability as well, which is hopefully encompasses more than more than just an employability route as well, but it enables us to hit more tick more than one box, as it were, as we're going through these different priorities for the university. Next slide. And all of this kind of fits into a framework that we developed as part of a student community engagement group at the university, which kind of fitted in with demonstrating really how there's a continuum of kind of engagement, of engaged learning for our students, right from kind of volunteering, where you kind of go off and do something completely different from your course, right through to the critical service learning that happens within our sociology and criminology courses that I mentioned earlier. And all of those activities are relevant, are part of the student civic journey, if we're talking about what Andy was talking about earlier, and that community engaged learning is one aspect of that that kind of framework, that continuum that can be enabled for students to be able to take part in opportunities within the university. So I don't worry about the detail on that, but I just wanted to kind of show the framework that it sits in at NTU. If you go on to the next slide. So in terms of how it fits in terms of the structure, at the university, we have kind of two ways that it fits within programs. One is within as an option, so it's an optional pathway within a module, which can be taken by the students. So either kind of as an option, for example, with the computer science, they have an option to take a practical technical project, and they can work with one of our partners with the community engaged learning project, or they'll do a fictional scenario, or they'll work on their own project where they build a website or build an app either for themselves or for one of our community projects. On the business school, they can choose to do a community engaged learning project, or choose to volunteer or do part-time work or a virtual internship, etc. So so that's an optional element, or they can do a requirement within a program where all the students will be involved in a CEL activity, and that's an integrated aspect of the program. And this will be where the content of the course will be fully guided around the CEL activity. So similar to Alison's module that she talked about earlier, where the whole of the module can be structured around that that actual activity, and that activity and the course content is all can be talked about as part of a social justice theme, etc. So that's much more able to be kind of put onto a social justice kind of lens to that, and so our social science modules are more geared towards that side of things. So next slide, please. So some of the examples of the projects that we're doing with organisations this year include with social sciences, doing some travel training materials for people with learning difficulties, and looking at female inclusion at a skate park. The business school students are using their skills to look at social media development or comm strategies. The computer science students are looking at app development, or looking at how websites are accessible for people with visual impairments. And the arts and humanities students are using their video programming skills, or looking at how research is being communicated with stakeholders in local communities. Next slide, please. And my team really works with organisations to develop those projects and programmes and try and fit them to those modules, so that relationship with the organisations is really key to understand the needs that the organisations are coming to us with and the challenges that they might be facing, and refer them to the academics in those courses. So those are some of the examples anyway. I think I just wanted to finish off kind of talking about NTU with some kind of enablers and some challenges that people might come across. So certainly enablers are academics and professional colleagues in the university that have enabled us to do these programs across the university. So those academics that have enabled us to support them in getting these programs within their courses makes all the difference to us being able to run these programs and work with the organisations that we do. The relationship with the community organisations, I always say that that's the bedrock to the work that we do. We have relationships with about 120 different organisations in Nottingham and in the city and the county. And the community engaged learning has helped to make those relationships even more transformational for those organisations and for us as a university. Have made them more mutually beneficial and enabled the organisations and the university to have better relationships with them, where we're able to more fully develop our relationships as we go through. The student approach on the whole has been great. They approach the projects with enthusiasm, with dedication and with professionalism, and the organisations have been really impressed with all of their work that they've done. And also I've been lucky in my team that with the timing of it, I was able to dedicate some central resource to be able to coordinate some of this work, so that we're able to expand some of this work across the university. And then some of the challenges, so different student groups and courses and finding relevant community experiences has been okay so far, but I think when we started getting requests from courses that might be slightly more tricky to find opportunities, and then that might become a challenge as we go forward, and the an increased number of courses, an increased number of students that are looking for this is already being a challenge. The voluntary sector in Nottingham is only so big, and we've only got so many organisations that we can work with, and so many of us that we can promote those opportunities, and so that's a challenge. And then applying kind of a social justice kind of framework is difficult across the whole range of courses as well. And so yes, so there's a few challenges would be what I would say. And so yes, there's a few challenges that we're coming up against. So that's from an NTU point of view. I just wanted to mention on the last slide that there is a national network around community engaged learning and service learning as well, that was established in 2019, which is basically a community practice. So if you are interested in this kind of work and you know people in your university or communities that are interested in learning more about this, we do have a mailing list that you can join. So myself and about 8 or 10 other practitioners are involved in organising this. We hold webinars about once a term, and we have an annual conference as well, which you'd be more than welcome to join as well. So it'd be great to see you involved in that as well. And I think that's me done. Hopefully I didn't go too far over. Thanks, Andy.
Andy, that was magnificent. Many, many thanks. It's quite clear that there's a lot of very rich work taking place at Nottingham Trent. And we've had a number of questions come through which respond to some of the issues that you raised. Debbie Squire at Chat, the Civic Universities Network, hi Debbie, has asked, did you map the community organisations prior to engagement? And how do you manage over 120 relationships, which seems an enormous scale?
Yeah, so did you map the community organisations prior? But no, they've grown over the years. So as I say, I've been here for quite a while. So they predominantly were volunteering relationships. So organisations that had volunteering programmes, and we referred them as volunteering organisations, and many of them still are. But now I have 3 members of my team who mainly manage those relationships, and they'll have some of those relationships which are quite kind of more time intensive, if you like, than others, and so we kind of manage it in that sense. And so some of those relationships we put a lot of effort in. Some of them, the organisations don't want a lot of time spent with them, and they just want us to be a referrer of volunteers. And so we kind of take the lead from the organisations, and we work with them to see where they want us to go with them during the year. So we'll have kind of an annual meeting with them. We have a working with Sensi, which is the department survey that we've been piloting recently. That's going to be an annual survey with them, which is around looking at the relationship. So we don't necessarily kind of concentrate on the outputs too much. We try and concentrate on the relationship and looking at how that relationship works with those organizations. So that's how we manage those relationships, is by trying to concentrate on the actual relationships rather than the outputs. And also we have kind of systems in place to, we have a CRM system in the university, which all the comms goes through. And then we also have a stakeholder management engagement reports that we have within our department as well. So we've done quite a lot of work around stakeholder management, which I'm happy to talk about to people as well if they want to.
Thanks, Andy. That's kind. We've got a question from a former NTU alumni, Matt, and he said, how is the approach, the community engaged learning approach, measured?
Yeah,
Or is it?
so yeah, the impact. So we did some evaluation last year, and we're carrying on with that evaluation this year. So we look at it from the point of view of student attitude towards kind of civic civicness, I guess, if you like. Last year, to see whether it changed. So we did a pre and post surveys towards their civic attitude. So we did some of that, but the response rates from the before and after surveys were quite a lot before and quite a lot of after, but we didn't get the matchups very well. So we're looking at trying to address some of that this year. But we did do a lot of focus groups with students on, especially the computer science course last year, from the students, and so we got a lot of evaluation from the students last year from their perspective. And we also looked at the impact on their attainment last year, which we're going to have a look at again this year for the computer science courses as well. And then we're also doing some work with the organisations to kind of assess what the impact has been for them, which it's going to be more of a qualitative kind of assessment rather than a quantitative work. So yeah, so we're in the process of doing that kind of evaluation work on the impact of CEL. So it's going to be over these years of doing it, we're looking at it to see how we can get that information, but it's an ongoing process, would be what I would say.
Well, we look forward to seeing some of those findings as they come out. One last question, and it comes from Tim Herrick, and it links to something you said about engaged academics are some of the enablers. He said, could you say a little bit about the balance in supporting academic colleagues in the work they're already doing, and encouraging those that may not be engaging to take this on as a project?
Yeah, so I have one member of my team who for part of her work, she's kind of academic facing for CEL, so she's kind of supporting colleagues to try and to do this kind of work, but also supporting the academics that are doing this work. And funnily enough, we had a meeting this morning with our Centre for Academic Development and Quality, and looking at how we can encourage other academics to think about this, and to look at how this could be employed in their courses, and thinking about it as a pedagogy. It's a way of teaching into their courses. And so my member of staff will be able to kind of go into, so we have course design sprints, or so when they're redesigning courses, having somebody to be able to be available to talk through with them about kind of ways of implementing this or integrating this into new module specs for new courses, or when they're redesigning courses, to have a think about involving this kind of approach into any new courses or redesigning courses. Then my staff are kind of available to have those conversations with those academics, and then support them in the process of looking at how that can be done in the most efficient way, but also using kind of the other members of staff in the university that deal with academic standards and quality to be able to enable them to help them to do that as well.
Well, many thanks, Andy, for a very rich overview of the work that's taking place at Nottingham Trent. And as I say, we look forward to hearing more about that work as it progresses. Our final presentation comes from colleagues at Leeds, in Leeds University, and Charlie, Josh and Jen are going to be talking about community-engaged learning through the Engaging the Modern City project. So over to the team.
Hello, thank you very much for your time and for the invitation. And this is a really wonderful experience to see all these different perspectives coming together. And just on that last point about the pedagogy, that's kind of the bit I'm really interested in. And I'm really thrilled because we have with us today someone who participated on the module, Josh Burke, and also someone who's been a partner, Jen Wilkins, who will give some insight and background onto the module from their different perspectives. So if you could put the slides up and start the slideshow. Sorry about the slides; they're always a bit disengaging, aren't they? But here we go. So the module, it's actually a module called Engaging the Modern City, and the module is run as an arts module. So I actually work in the politics department, the School of Politics, and the module is delivered with an arts code to show that it's interdisciplinary, and the real thing which I think it kind of brings is this notion of hope in critical pedagogy, hence the Giroux quote. So this is very much the way I've found myself energized by this as a kind of an academic in a Brussels group. There's lots of focus on research and these kind of things. What's been wonderful about this module is it's opened up to me whole new ways of thinking about teaching, which has been really wonderful. If we could go to the next slide, please. The immediate challenge for this came from a set of circumstances, really. I mean, I've been teaching politics in the EU for a long time, and I did lots of policy training, and found that when I was teaching, I was using the same material to talk to practitioners as I was to my students, but I was doing something different with them. For the students, we were talking about truth claims and knowledge, and apply it to theories and getting critical engagement. For the policymakers, when I was talking about single market reforms from the EU, the focus was on, what are they going to do on Thursday when they go back to work, right? So these two things came together, and it helped me think a little bit more about how I was teaching and how we could bring those two sides together. And I wrote some stuff about that, and at the same time, there was some interest in the University of Leeds about how we could reconnect more with the community. Leeds used to be a predominantly civic university with 90% students coming from the city of Leeds and only 10% from outside. And then by 2015-16, it was completely the other way around. The other big issue that the university was facing was how do they retain their graduates within the city? And this picture on the right shows where graduates all go to, and it's the big London blob, which attracts so many people. So there's a real issue about how can the university get people to engage in the city and understand how they link to it. And we also had some interest in this module. It's a postgraduate module. So although there are quite a few undergraduate options for practice-based learning or for community-orientated learning, there wasn't much for a postgraduate taught program. And that presents really particular problems to address because of the time frame, apart from anything else, and the intensity of module offers that go with a taught postgraduate program. So we developed a partner pilot. We spoke to a number of really key organizations around the city of Leeds, focused more on the cultural sector, and we asked them what they wanted. We took about a year to design the module, and then we came up with a module structure. So just if you go to the next slide, please, I can just show you the range of groups we've been involved in. So it's 5 years on, we've done about 25 projects. We've done more than 25 projects. But with around 13 partner organizations, we've had about 125 students in and 12 tutors. That 12 tutors is important. I'll talk about that in a moment. And you can see it's varied in time. The COVID years, we withdrew quite a bit because it was a bit stressful to manage. But what's really nice about this is that we've got some, if you like, returning partners. And I think that's been, so the Playhouse, the Performance Ensemble, and Jen's organization, Catch, has come back again, which is really brilliant. What's been really great about the Playhouse story, for example, is that over a period of 5 years, the projects have changed and they've developed on previous years' projects. So they started off looking at the heyday project that they had to try and work out how this intervention they have to support older people supports older people in needs. From that, they identified issues of access, which is the second year project. Then from that, there was issue about loneliness. And then, so you just get these projects which develop over time with a partner organization, which is really fantastic. The 12 tutors was important because we wanted to make sure that this module was interdisciplinary. So it's open to students, postgraduate students from across the university. And we wanted to have tutors who come from around the university. So we've had a real richness of disciplines participating on it. So next slide, please. I know I've got to rush for I'll get stuff for time. So on the right-hand side, this is the timetable. Around June, we try and identify partners. So I asked this year's partners if they want to continue, and we approached some others. We're trying to get a balance of stable and new all the time. We're trying to get a variety of different sectors and also different sizes. So big organizations can be very solid. Smaller ones we have to be quite cautious about because there's an issue about stability of organizations. We can swamp them if we're not careful. We select the partners in September. The students will submit an application form to the module when they arrive. So they're arriving in September, these students, they have to apply. We've got a standardized format which asks them to say what they're going to get out of it and what they can bring. And then we select the students and we allocate them according to the projects. And then they've got a few weeks to try and work out what they're going to do. So when partner organizations apply, they're very clear about the project they want to do and why they want to do it. And the students have that period until November to basically work out what they can do. Throughout the period of the module from October right through to March, they're getting a weekly session where they're talking to their to tutors and they're getting some structured support on issues. And then the final kind of things are showcased in March, which you're all welcome to come to, obviously, where they show what they've done. Next slide, please. Sorry, stay where we are. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So that on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see the things that we get out of it. So the postgraduates get placements. They get to work in interdisciplinary teams, which is really brilliant because they can come with their own experience from life and bring that to the task. And I think that's because it's a task-driven activity rather than an intellectual program. They're able to think critically from all their different perspectives, and that really enriches the experience that they've had. They also get to use their skills in practice, and we assess them on that. So they have a reflective log, they have a showcase at the end, and also a portfolio where they gather all the evidence together to describe what they've done and explain what they're doing. It also creates really wonderful connections with the students in the city, with the students as groups, and that's really lovely. And because we have so many international students on this, you get these lovely kind of global relationships building up over time. So next slide, please. So what we thought we'd do as a team is just talk a bit about the good things and the bad things, because obviously there's lovely things that come out of this, but there's also downsides. So I'm going to go first, and then I think Josh, and then Jen. We're going to say what we like about it and what we find a bit of a challenge. The first thing, I think this experiential learning works terribly well. I really like doing it. I ran a module before for 10 years on Britain and Europe, and we got questions from the House of Lords Select Committee clerk, and the students would do it. They'd be more motivated, they did terrific work, they got incredibly confident. I also think it's a very good way of promoting engagement across the town and gown barrier, if you like. Sprue did this paper called Talent, Not Technology. A lot of impact and research impact is discussed around ideas coming from academics. It's the richness that you get from students, which we've seen in all these discussions so far today, which really tells a much better story about how academia can work with society. I think that's really powerful. But the third thing, which was a bit of a surprise to me, was the student-led learning creates different ways of learning for students. So we have a lot of international students who are coming to a different part of the world, learning in a different way. This way of learning, because it's more practice-based, goes at a different speed, and they start off nervous, perhaps, growing confidence, and then they contribute along the course of the journey of this long, thin module, and that works really well. The challenges have been lots of university procedures make it quite difficult, lots of budgetary issues which are problematic in the financial model. The issue about the partners, I really worry sometimes whether partners are being put under too much pressure to help us out rather than it being the other way around. We do lots of evaluation and stuff, but there is an asymmetry there, which I worry about. It would be good to take money in. It's much better to have longer time frames for the cooperations because that can generate far better understandings of what's worked and what hasn't. And also the workload, it doesn't really work terribly well at a university. I mean, I kind of run all this myself, and it's a little bit of a cottage industry, and we are scaling up more at the university, easy, but it does create an awful lot of uncertainty, and there are other costs involved. Okay, so that's me. Josh, over to you, please. And could we have the next slide?
Hi, I'm Josh. So I was on the postgraduate talk module last year, and yeah, it was exactly what I needed to kind of close the gap in my knowledge between my performance design masters and my kind of career path that I want to choose, which is more socially engaged. So yeah, I think the module benefited greatly from having a multidisciplinary cohort. This allowed everyone to showcase their core skills and to develop new skills. Having really credible partners was really beneficial because it validated the student experience. And that by them being strongly established, having live real-world projects, it kind of helped to validate that as well. The tutor support throughout was really beneficial. And yeah, this module was directly beneficial to me because it allowed me to develop a relationship with a charitable organisation, Catch, which then led to me to have a career with Situ, which was linked in through that. I've also got a long-standing relationship with Catch now, who I'm really sorry, I'm in the middle of it. I'll be 2 minutes. In the middle. I just don't know what to say.
Sorry, Jen, would you like to just take over? I think Josh has got an interruption there. Would you like to can we just move to the next slide and then maybe
I'll come back on my phones.
Sorry, Jen, are you there? Could you just say a little bit about your experience with the
yeah,
module?
Absolutely. I'll come
Thanks,
in
Jen.
there. I'll come in there, Charlie. Yeah, it was a really great opportunity for the students to connect with the local community here at Catch. As I said before, we are a youth charity based in Hare Hills, and it was great to have that additional resource of the uni students coming in to kind of deliver on some projects that we had. So to give you a little bit of information on the last project, on the bottom of the screen there, you can see a photo on the left, and that's where the students were given the opportunity to help us design a mindfulness garden here at Catch for the young people and for the community. So it was very practical, very hands-on, a little bit of research in there, but all along the way we put the young people at the heart of what they were doing, which is kind of the ethos we have here at Catch. This year the students are doing something totally different. So they have taken on a research project. So looking at how we can help develop relationships within the city for the young people who live in the city to then work in the city, go into higher education, or as Josh has explained, he now works with Situ, which is a relationship that we've helped to kind of build there. It involves young people in the collaboration. So as well as everything that they're trying to do with the module, it also gives something for our young people to aspire to. So they get to have those conversations with the university students about their experiences, and it gives them higher aspirations. We find here in Hare Hills aspirations are low. So it's working with us within our ethos, again, our vision and our mission, to increase those aspirations. The only couple of things that I would say are negatives. They're not really negatives, but because of the time constraints within the module, it is quite difficult to get those relational contacts there. So I think there's 5 contact points for everybody to come here to Catch. Obviously it's international students come in as well, so it's hard within those 5 contact points to fully understand the cultural differences and the nuances, and there are a few language barriers, but nothing that we can't work on. I think Josh will agree that some struggles went on, but again, that's about working with us and as students, as a group that have come together or been put together and working through those, looking at your strengths and your weaknesses. But overall, it's been an amazing partner experience. We've actually got students from this year coming in this afternoon to talk to us about their development so far, and Josh will be joining us on that. So yeah, we're really, really pleased with how it's gone.
Brilliant. Look, I think I'm being asked to wind up now, but I just want to say thank you very much, Josh and Jen, for your support and the fantastic things that you've done and you've been telling us about. I think if we need to conclude, I can quickly say I found that there's an awful lot to gain from this, both as an academic interested in pedagogy, but also in terms of thinking about how we can produce new learning experience for students, which can be very productive in facilitating critical engagement with material they might have otherwise only thought about in a kind of a written context. And I think that's been very powerful. Thank you very much. Sorry we took so long.
Not at all, Charlie. It was fascinating. And Josh, you once again highlighted for us all the challenges sometimes of online webinars, which you produced a through the keyhole moment. But that was really interesting, and it's already brought in a couple of interesting questions. Anne Laybourne's asked, because this is a postgraduate course, she said, what extent do you think the learning from the module so early translates into student dissertations later? I don't know, Josh, maybe you may want to speak to that as someone that's just gone through this process.
Yeah, well, I suppose this module had a huge impact on all my thinking and all my learning throughout. You know, I started on a performance design master's, or that is what I did. But after this module, I very much was moving towards social engagement, and you know, I did that through performative techniques, but it was very much at the forefront in my thinking. If that answers the question.
No, it does indeed. Thanks very much for that, Josh. And it kind of links on to a question from Matt, and this is probably best sent to Jen, actually, which is, you know, as a partner in the project, you know, to what extent is there a conversation about the final project that's undertaken? You know, to what extent do you as the external organisation have agency in terms of project sign-off? Is it a deliberative process?
In terms of the project, we kind of we design them ourselves, so we give the projects to university and we'll have a conversation about our projects and whether that's suitable, and then the students apply for them, if I'm right in saying that, Charlie. So the students each apply for their favourite or what they would like to get involved in, and then if they're successful, then we go to an initial meeting at the university. They meet us as partners and we talk about the project. This year it's kind of developed a little bit into something slightly different, but that's just the way it is. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, sorry.
So I was going to say, that's a nice thing about it, because you don't know who you're going to get in the room. You don't know what the project's going to be. You don't know what the students are going to bring. So you get, you know, you have great intentions and things going in a different way. And I think that uncertainty is very different to the normal learning experience. Normally, you know, they get 10 lectures and 10 seminars, and there's objectives to learn to, and that's it. So it's a more open process.
Yeah, and it's empowering students to, you know, as you said, it's that student-led learning approach, which is really interesting. A final question to you, Charlie, which is from Piers van Berg, and he says, you know, considering you've kept this going for so long, despite the obstacles that you raised, you know, how have you managed to keep it going? Were there sources of support elsewhere in the institution to continue this programme?
Yeah, that's a lovely question, because and the question is because I work with lovely people, you know, so I have great partners like Jen, and I have lots of really great partners around Leeds, brilliant colleagues who want to give it a go. It's a very different form of teaching. Lots of people do it in addition to their normal workload, and the great thing about it is it's just got this this amazing emotional connection that you get, and it's just a very different way of learning. I don't normally kind of get emotional when I'm assessing work, but some of the films that students put together at the end of their projects are really moving, because they get right to the heart of why we're teaching, why we're studying, how we live together. And I think especially in these moments, these kind of COVID times, slightly crazy political system at the moment, if I can say that, it's good to see how agency can come through the work that we do and coming together, you know, as a broader kind of community, a civic community.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that admittance of the idea that, you know, education is emotional, and in many ways we can't help but get invested in the creative process and in what our students produce. And in that sense, it's been really encouraging to hear from all our speakers. I'd like to bring James, Andy and Ali back into the conversation. If you want to click your cameras on, we've got just 3 or 4 minutes just to consider one final question, and it is a sort of question about how do we begin to wire these different approaches towards enhancing the civic university experience of students in terms of how can we connect what happens in the classroom, what happens in that extracurricular space, what happens when we develop programs that may sit on aside of programs. Is there anything we need to learn from your experiences in terms of how we, institutions, regardless of their background, the type of institution, can provide a sort of civic guarantee for students, regardless from where they study? I don't know if anyone wants to sort of come back on that. Says he, hopefully.
I can jump in quickly, Andy. If you,
Thanks,
you
James.
I think from our experience here at Huddersfield, and I don't know the answer to this, I think, top-down approaches and bottom-up approaches both have their value in this. But I know from our point of view, we have seen the value of a top-down approach in terms of widening that reach and impact. And that's driven by senior level endorsement. And I think that is so important. And I think, if you're developing this type of work, trying to gain that senior level of endorsement, even if it's from one person, even if it's one person who has a loud, important voice in the room, it's not a silver bullet, is it? But it can have a really, really positive impact.
It's that institutional buy-in that's required in many ways. So it's a whole institution approach. Yeah. Charlie, yes.
I just wanted to agree with that. We've got a wonderful new pro vice chancellor looking at community engagement called Sonia Kumar, who gets it, who really pushes hard on these agendas, and it's really terrific to have someone like that. I also think there is an issue about overfishing and about being careful about those relationships. Universities are big, fairly well resourced, especially in a fragile ecosystem of charity organisations. So I think there's always an issue about being careful about how we manage that, and we don't smother, for want of a better word.
Just to add to that I absolutely agree with what Charlie and James have both said about needing that institutional buy-in and that top-down approach. But I also think there's a lot of power in the conversations that we've just had within this network, and trying out new ways and making sure that we have really strong evaluation frameworks that sit behind what we're trying within our different institutions, and openly sharing that within networks such as this. So I think there's a really strong part for research to be playing a part within this as well.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, and I think I'll back up everything that the three of you just said. I think we've got some very kind of strong people talking about civic engagement in our university, and pushing that agenda, and that raises this kind of work high on the agenda here. But there's also a lot of other agendas, and I think balancing those agendas is really important as well. And then also, to Charlie's point, we have a lot of kind of contacts with our organisations and with industry and everything. And I think there is a danger of that, of all those contacts, and I think of our organisations being swamped by a myriad of people in the university. And I think we need to be making sure that we're kind of on top of that as well. It's our responsibility to make sure that we're in charge of how we manage that relationships with our organisations, because it's not fair for us to put that on our organisations to tell it, for us to being told about what other people in the university are doing by our organisations. And so I think there's a real key there for us as universities to do that.
Well, thanks very much for your concluding thoughts, everyone. I'm realising we're nearly close to 3 o'clock and we need to work on. So thank you very much to all our speakers. Particular thanks to Jen and Josh, obviously taking time out of their own working day to come in from outside the university system. And thank you very much to you, the audience. It's been very interesting. Thank you very much for your questions, very much for your points. I'd like to thank our colleagues at the Civic Universities Network, particularly to Louisa and Ellen and the technical team, but also to Debbie Squire and Greg Burke, who've been very much firmly behind this, and also to the UPP Foundation, and particularly Richard Bramner, who've been very kind in supporting this. I'd also like to thank Tanya Carrega at the Institute for Community Studies and Emily Morrison for supporting that. The Civic University Network have asked me to let you know that you can access a wide array of resources and event outputs on their website, and that'll be in the chat link. And also that you can subscribe to the Civic University's network newsletter to find out all the latest things about it. This work will continue and we will be in touch. We are very much keen to build that evidence base. And in that sense, we're very keen to connect with you and keep this conversation going. As noted, we are going to be drawing together some of the thoughts that have come from the presentations and from engaging with yourselves to build up the evidence base. But this focus on enhancing the Civic University experience is not something that's going to be developed overnight, and it's going to be a longitudinal piece of work. And we hope that we'll be able to keep as many of you involved in this as we move forward. But many, many thanks. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Andy Mycock. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.